welcome to the Habibis, three Arabic game developers drinking good Arabic tea. I'm your host for this week, Osama Dorius,
And I'm Fawzi Mesmar.
And I'm Rami Ismail.
and it's been a couple of weeks, folks. Did you
For,
miss me?
we missed you.
We miss you. Welcome
Oh,
back.
I miss you too.
We tried all sorts of things.
I heard.
We tried adding a laugh track that helped a little bit. We tried having a guest. I mean, the guest was great, but
Yeah.
we also missed you anyway.
I saw the title of the first episode I missed, and it was just like Osama laugh track, and I was like, like it's perfect. Like I was so happy to be included, even when I wasn't there. And for those who don't know, I don't know how much you told people, but the reason I wasn't here is because we moved. We bought a house, and I had 2 weeks of downtime where we were painting and cleaning and moving heavy boxes back and forth. So it was a lot of work. And I had no internet for a big portion of that time, except on my phone. But you can't really do a podcast on your phone, can you?
I mean, you technically can, but also you were moving, so
Yes.
I just focus on that.
Yeah, and we're moving like 5 people's worth of things. You know what's really funny? A big chunk of the boxes that we moved were packed from our last move 11 years ago and never.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I opened a treasure trove of things. Like, some of these you'd appreciate, Fauzi. I opened some instruction manuals, like, those game guides
Oh,
from
yeah.
Street Fighter Alpha 3, I think is one of the older ones that I have.
Wow.
No, I did have a Super Street Fighter 2 one as well. So, like, those have been in a box. I forgot I had them. Like as soon
Wow.
as I opened the box, I instantly remembered. But you know that the feeling where you just open something, you're like, oh, yeah, I used to collect these.
I love this stuff, man. You kind of get lost in a moment when you like remember the stuff that you used to watch, like old magazines and stuff like that. It's kind of like your own personal museum.
Yes.
When you move, it unlocks all of these like older memories, and you just get lost in like looking at old stuff you used to own or drawings and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I'd go through the back then, depending on what age, I used to actually even write notes inside. And reading those, it's like you're talking to your old self again. It's it's very interesting.
That's pretty cool. How far back does the stuff that you find go?
Well, these instruction books were maybe from when I was 12 or 13. Some of them,
Wow.
like some of them are, like I think the older one, the Super Street Fighter 2 one, maybe I was 13 or 14 actually, 13 or 14.
Well, so like 60 years ago or
Yeah,
something.
like 150 years ago, Randy. A long time ago.
Yeah. Man, 10 I was barely born then, I think.
Barely born.
Barely born. I'm trying to figure out how old I would have been if Osama was 12.
Well, I mean, what are you now? 16?
Yeah, I'm approximately 16 years old.
Yeah. Oh well, I don't know. Math is hard. So, what did I miss?
I mean, in terms of let's see, in terms of games, I finally started playing some games again. I had like an entire list of stuff 2 episodes ago, I think.
Oh, okay.
There was a game called Spookware that I can really, really recommend if you haven't played it. So,
Spookware? No, I have
Spookware. It's like WarioWare but spooky.
not. Ooh.
It's for PC. It's very good. I think that was my biggest thing the last 2 weeks. Fauzi, what was your biggest thing?
In the past couple of weeks, I've work mostly. Been very, very
Fair.
busy with work and stuff, but like getting some time to play some games. I've played a bunch of Psychonauts. We talked about that on the podcast.
Right.
We played 12 minutes. We also talked about that on the podcast.
Yeah, I heard your thoughts on 12 minutes, and they echo mine. The game that went from, oh my god, this is probably my game of the year, to a little bit later, never mind.
I don't want to be here talking about this.
I love this review. This could be game of the year. Actually, never mind.
Never mind. There's one point, I'm sure you know which one I'm talking about,
Yeah.
where I'm like, yeah, no, it's not even making my top list anymore. Valiant effort, good try.
Yeah, it was a good attempt, and
Yes.
for a game that is so weird, it's cool that they tried.
Yes, and I had a lot of good about it, yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of good. It just made a choice that made it really hard to recommend, and
Yeah.
sometimes that happens. And
Absolutely. On the topic of spookware, kind of, I have a confession. I've never played a WarioWare game. I was actually really excited for the new WarioWare that's coming out on
Ooh.
Switch because I have never tried a WarioWare.
I've played it again. I think I talked a little bit about the demo that came out, but the weird thing is, I think WarioWare really shines in that it is consistent input, but very variable mechanics. So every
Mm-hmm.
little mini game has completely different mechanics, and I think they're messing it up for the new one.
Interesting.
Because they have this thing where now you're playing from characters, and the characters have consistent mechanics. Just what you do with them is different per level.
I see.
Mm-hmm.
But that's actually not as interesting because kind of the joy of WarioWare was you get a thing and there's like
A
a
couple of
log of
seconds to
wood
figure it out.
and an axe, and you have your four normal buttons. So hit every button, see what happens, and then do the thing that you think you have to do, and you figure that out in a few seconds.
Oh, okay.
Well, this one is you get the level, you look at your character, you're like, okay, this character can do this and that. How do I use that to solve this puzzle? And it's just a different thing.
So what you're saying is, when the new one comes out, in addition to playing the new one, I should also like dig up an old one and play that.
Yes,
to play.
absolutely.
The Game Boy Advance one is probably my favorite, but there was a DS one that was also really, really good.
The last one that came out at the very end of the 3DS life was also pretty good.
Was good. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
good.
Okay.
It's just this one. They're going a strange direction, and instead of that, I would just recommend you play Spookcore.
Yeah, WarioWare Gold, I think it was called.
Yeah, for the
For the 3DS. Yeah.
Yep.
Have you, Osama? So, have you ever played the Rhythm Heaven game?
Rhythm Heaven? No, I have not.
Rami, you played those games, I imagine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I think also like if you're gonna dust off 3DS and play a WarioWare game, you should also play a Rhythm Heaven.
Okay. I'm looking at it right now.
Rhythm Heaven Mega Mix on the 3DS is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I still have
There
my
was a
3DS.
lot of good stuff on those games, on those
Yeah.
devices. Honestly,
I miss Rhythm Heaven, man. Those games are so good.
Wow. I've heard of it. I've never
Yeah.
played it. And
it's funny. It's funny that this is the first moment in my life where I realized the aesthetics between WarioWare and Rhythm Heaven are not that. They're not that far apart in a way. Like
No.
bright rainbow colory stuff with like big bold characters. Like, yeah, okay, fair.
They're probably the same division of Nintendo, actually.
Now that you mention
yeah,
it, it's very likely.
Yeah.
it's really interesting. Kind of. Is it like? I mean, when you say Rhythm Heaven, I assume it's kind of gameplay similar to Elite Beat Agents, something like that. Like a rhythm game, but you tap the screen. I don't know. I'm looking at screenshots and I can't tell what the gameplay is.
It's like I think that's why I got reminded by it with WarioWare is because it is a rhythm game that has a lot of tiny levels in which you have to interact with it to the rhythm, but every level is different, and you have to figure that out as well.
Okay, that's all right. Cool.
It's like a bunch of rhythm mini games.
I have homework.
It's funny because I know the game is Rhythm Heaven, but I think that is because I always bought a lot of my games in Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
But apparently in Europe it released as Rhythm Paradise.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I did not know that.
Wait, so the games in Egypt have more likely the American name?
Yeah, because they're just fake import with like printed images on, like they're not real.
Yeah. I was just curious if it followed more the North America or Europe.
Kind of whatever.
Okay, I see. Free for
Just
all.
whatever was easier to find and print.
Yeah.
That's the one.
That makes sense. Okay, so
Yeah.
it's kind of like Chinatown rules, I guess. Here.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah.
Like it's just whatever worked.
Yeah. The Japanese name for it is Tengoku, which is literally sky country, which could be heaven or paradise. So
Okay.
either work.
Okay, that works. There's no rhythm in the name.
Anyway, Game Boy.
It's good. Definitely check it out. Like
Yeah.
It's the
I
kind
can't
of thing-
recommend it enough. It was on my Game of the Year list when it came out. Mega
Wow.
Mix on the 3DS.
Thank
Wow.
you. I'm definitely. Gonna look it up.
I'm just happy that here at the Habibis podcast we give reviews for like recommendations for 15-year-old games. Like, that's what we're here for.
Mega Mix came out in 2016, So
Wait,
it's
really?
16?
16 megabytes
Wow.
on a 3DS. Yeah, so it's
Yeah.
5 years
No, it's
old.
just 5 years old.
That's not so bad.
Yeah, so we didn't go back into the 80s.
Right.
It's
It's
bringing
still
up our
fairly
average.
recent.
It's like Fauzi old instead of Osama old.
Yeah,
Fair, fair.
I love it.
exactly. We're here to review your this is your 3DS podcast.
Yes. The Habibis 3DS.
The Habibis 3D.
Yeah, I remember boxing my 3DS. I don't remember unboxing it. I'm gonna have to go through boxes to find it now.
I think I have a box of 3DSs, actually, if I think about it. I might have like
Wait.
6 of them.
Wait,
That
of
does not surprise me
3DSs?
at all.
Not of DSs, but of 3DSs?
3DSs, yeah. Because I
Why
got
do you need 6?
the Ambassador, the first one that came out, the tiny 3DS, then the 3DS XL, then
Yes.
then I got the Japanese 3DS because it was region locked.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Then I got the new 3DS, which comes with a little knob thing
Yes.
to play Monster Hunter. And then the which Zelda was it? There's a Zelda that came out with the limited edition new 3DS.
Right.
Wow.
Did you also get the 2DS?
No, the 2DS, no.
Oh.
No, screw that.
Yeah. I had 2.
Amazing.
I had the 3DS and I had the 2DS when my kids wanted to play because if they drop it, it doesn't break. Because the hinge on my 3DS,
there's no hinge.
yeah, the hinge on my 3DS is loose and it's their fault. So, kids.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So the 2DS was definitely the one to skip if you don't have kids. But it's also the one to get if you have
Yeah.
kids.
I remember the one I got was the Majora's Mask one because it came with the Skull Kid statue,
Right.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
and also I couldn't find that on sale in Japan, so I remember ordering one in the UK and my friend actually shipping it to me.
Wow.
What was your favorite DS game?
DS or 3DS?
It doesn't matter. Just the entire DS family.
Oof, what a question!
What a question.
What a question! My favorite
Osama's back, so we're back to the hard hitting. Just like that. Let's
favorite
deep cuts here.
favorite DS game.
Yeah, it's hard. I have to actually
A Link
try to
Between
recollect.
Worlds.
Yeah, those.
Okay.
A Link Between Worlds.
It's a good one. It's a good one.
What's mine?
But there's so many, man.
There's a lot.
I
There's
think
a
for me
lot.
it was Castlevania: Dawn of Sorrow. I'm a huge Castlevania fan.
That's pretty good, actually.
Yeah.
It's a good one as well.
Ooh, Ghost Trick was a DS game.
Yeah, I have mine is Ghost Trick.
I love Ghost Trick.
Ghost Trick is my favorite DS game.
That's a wonderful game.
Well,
It's so good.
does it count that they released Chrono Trigger on the DS and it's one of my favorite games of all time, or does that count as a Super Nintendo?
I mean, is the DS version your favorite version of that game?
No.
No, then that doesn't count.
Stop trying to cheat. Don't bring Chrono Trigger into
You
this.
can't just bring in all these very old things from before I was born into this conversation. Like, come on, let's.
But that's like everything, Ravi.
Osama, you can't talk about Xbox 360 games, okay? That's before my time.
All right, all we could talk about is Fortnite, right?
Yeah.
And Roblox.
Yeah.
Mm,
You know,
I
the funny
love-
thing about that is kids are growing up like that now. They're playing
Yeah.
Fortnite and Roblox. It's actually kind of interesting.
Yeah, like my 3 kids. My son's favorite game is Fortnite. My daughter's favorite game is Fortnite, and my youngest daughter is Roblox. And
Right.
my daughter who transitioned to Fortnite, her favorite game before that was Roblox. It's like there are 3 games now because you're either in that ecosystem or you're playing Minecraft still. That's
Right.
their friends.
I mean, the thing that's interesting to me is that all these kids are growing up with these games that are built around creating.
Yeah.
That's cool. I'm really curious what kind of game developers we're going to get out of this generation of like 5 to 10-year-olds right now, or like 5 to 15-year-olds.
Yeah, especially when it comes to Roblox, because Roblox actually has an infrastructure where you could create games that others play and actually monetize it.
Yeah.
And,
Exactly.
I don't know if you saw that article the other day
I
about
did.
how that's exploitative.
It
but
is.
I was really, really impressed by that 13-year-old kid sounding like a burned out 14-year-old indie developer in a smoky bar at GDC. He was like, discoverability is really rough. And I'm just imagining some indie sitting next to there like, yeah, I hear you. And the kid's like, yeah, and they also take like 70% of our revenue. And the indie just going like, what?
Yeah.
70? I thought we got 70? Okay.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Like, if I, as an indie dev, feel really bad about how somebody's being treated business-wise, that's bad news. Let's be honest.
Yeah. Yeah. My
But
brother learned that the hard way because my brother's was an indie game dev as well. He worked for a small company called Spearhead for a while, and then he
mm,
started his own thing where he tried to make Roblox games. And I mean, he finished the game and it was good, but didn't really make any money off of it. So
yeah,
yeah, went through that pipeline.
Terry Kavanagh tried. That was fun.
Oh yeah.
Guy who did VVVVV and Super Hexagon and Dicey Dungeons. He just went and made a Roblox game just to see how the interface works and how the creation tools are.
Hmm.
That's really good.
Okay.
It's a really good tool set apparently. I
Hmm.
tried a bit with it. I didn't finish a game. I just played around and okay, you can place objects, you can do this, you can add that. It's pretty clear that it's a pretty complete tool set, but I never got to the point where I actually like published something. But I'm just I grew up with like mods and like script files and stuff like that, and I think a lot of that turned me into the game developer I am today.
Hmm.
Yes.
So for me to see that kind of return, even if it's like a weird closed ecosystem, I'm into it. I was a little worried that everybody was growing up with like shiny devices where you didn't even know that things were being made.
Yeah. Actually, the same thing for me. I got my start in two ways, two separate ways. One is I started making levels for whatever game had an editor built in. I made like
Hmm.
StarCraft, Heroes of Might and
Same.
Magic levels. I made Duke Nukem 3D levels, like anything that included an editor. And the other way is actually freelance kind of as a graphic web designer, which meant I learned Flash, which meant I could make little crappy
Wow.
Flash
Hmm.
games.
Are you me?
Well, ActionScript 2.0, so I'm
All
older
right.
than you.
I no, but I started with 2.0 as well
Oh,
because
okay.
it was messier code, so it was easier to learn.
For me, I
Right.
was stubborn. I didn't want to learn 3.0 because I already knew 2.0. Why
Right.
why
Yeah,
pick up something
3.0
else?
was more object oriented, I think,
Yeah.
than 2.0. So for 2.0 you just slammed code into things and then it worked. And for 3.0 you had to think about structure
Yep.
and I didn't feel like that. So I stayed on 2.0 for a pretty long time.
Me
And I
too.
used this really bad program called Swift or Swish or something like it.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about.
It
Swift.
was
Ah,
this Swish? No, I think it was
Swift. It was
Swish.
Swift. I think it was Swift.
No, I think Swift is for Apple. That's new.
Hold on.
I think it
Hmm.
was called Swish. Let me. Are we all just googling this? Yeah, it's Swish.
Yes.
It's Swish. I found it.
Okay.
Swish.
Yes, you're right.
Orange weird logo.
Yes.
And yeah, it was like a bad. It was like a bad middle interface for Flash that actually was a little more accessible. So I
Yes.
used I used Swish.
I
Ah,
dabbled in
good
it.
times.
Yeah, I dabbled in it as well.
Yeah,
But
no, I did, but I had pretty much the same route. Like, I mean, I'd already like programmed a little bit before then because my first encounter with game development was code. But then I also went. I took like the Age of Empires level editor or
yeah,
scenario builder,
yeah,
StarCraft, and then kind of like things got out of hand from there.
yeah, same.
While also doing web development on the side. Yeah.
Wow, that's really interesting. What
Hmm.
about you, Fozy? How'd you get started?
Me and a group of friends, I think there was 8 of us or 9 of us, we wanted to make a Game Boy Advance game.
But just out of nowhere, that was not that. Just at some point, you were playing a Game Boy Advance game. You were like, "I want to make one."
So, like, the longer version of the story is that there's a shop that opened up across the road. It was from my place in Amman. It was called Chrono Way, and I was like, Chrono Way, what is this place? Um, so I just went in. I was playing Chrono Cross a lot at that point, and I went in and tried to meet the owner, who happens to be a very like-minded dude, who with a group of friends started to this shop that sells video games and rents anime and stuff like that.
Nice.
And then me and him we started talking, and he said that they really want to make a game. And all of us were playing Game Boy Advance a lot at the time, so we're like, let's make a Game Boy Advance game. So because we wanted to make
Wow,
a small-ish game,
it really came out of nowhere.
it really
That's
came out of
cool.
nowhere. So we actually wanted to go through the route. We asked for dev kits initially, and Nintendo were like, "What? You guys play games, let alone make them?" They're like, "Okay, if you want dev kits, you can pick them up from your nearest distribution center. It's in London. It will cost, I don't know,
Wow.
a couple of
Right,
€1,000 or something like that." So we quickly thought about it, like, okay, so that's not gonna happen since we
right.
barely have any money between us. So we had our commercial units. We had like 3 or 4 commercial units, and we just hacked them.
Yeah.
We cracked
Wow.
them, and then we used the emulation. We built everything from scratch, C++.
Wow.
That is impressive.
We were all studying programming, and we wanted to make. Of course, our first project was an RPG.
Oh,
Of
I thought
course.
you were gonna
Yeah.
say an MMO, but no.
No,
At
no.
that back then, it was
It's-
RPG.
That was
yeah,
RPG. We
RPG.
wanted to make Chrono Trigger, but in Arabic. And
Yes.
obviously,
Right.
Game Boy Advance did not have any Arabic support, so we made a bitmap of the Arabic alphabet, and we put
Mhm.
that in the thing. Eventually, like we decided, since we were all working on this, we rented a shop. We were paying like $10 each a month for this place. We work every day till 11 p.m. That was the rule. Is that
Mhm.
until 11 p.m. no gaming. But after 11, we basically had 4 computers in that place on plastic chairs and stuff. So that was effectively a LAN. So
Wow.
we're playing StarCraft from 11 p.m. till 6 a.m. every day.
And when did you
Nice.
sleep?
Yeah, who needs sleep, man? When
But
I,
it sounds like he was 16.
I
Like
was 17 at the time.
Right.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that was my
Yeah.
first game. I made it when I was 17. So eventually we
Wow.
were like, I was like in my second year of university. I studied computer science. So we were like, let's use this game as one of the people from the team. Let's use it for their graduation project. They're about to graduate from university. So,
Mhm.
so we went there in the classroom. Everybody was there. There was a jury of programming professors. We gave each of them a Game Boy Advance in their hand, and there was a game running. Like there was a JRPG running. You can walk around. You can talk to people in a village, and you can have a turn-based combat.
Wow.
That's incredible.
They had no idea what they're looking at, and they were
Yeah.
like, why is this so small? Why not on a big screen?" And some of them were like, gaming is a waste of time. Why would you why would you want to
Wow.
make video games? You should make useful software like websites or database.
Right.
And that was pretty much, I think, one of the first game to ever be made on a Nintendo console in the Middle East, for sure,
Yeah.
and one of the first games to be made in the Middle East, period. And
Right.
they got a D plus,
Wow.
barely
Wow.
passed. But
Wow.
there was somebody in the audience that was attending, and turns out they knew somebody, and they wrote an article about us in the newspaper.
Wow.
And another dude got funding and wanted to start a company, and they were looking for people who had any gaming background in 28 countries, and they just found us. So they hired all 9
Wow.
of us, and they were like, "You
Wow.
train 40 other people, and you make me a PC game." But that's like, that's the
Wow.
next level.
How did the other 8 end up? Like did they stay in games? Did they spread
They're
out
all in
again?
games. They're all in games.
Wow.
So like
Wow.
the dude that I met in the shop ended up going to Japan. That was his dream. So me and him, we also went to the Japanese embassy, and we organized Japanese classes, and we ended up studying Japanese together. A group
Wow.
of us. He ended up moving to Japan, living there for 9 years or something like that. Now he came back to Jordan, and he started his own gaming company.
Nice.
Another friend of mine started his own gaming company. Another friend of mine, Osama, he's in sumo.
Ooh,
Wow.
Sumo Digital.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's a good
Yeah,
place.
so a bunch
love
of
his
What
us.
a
name.
story.
I think Osama Hussein is his name. I think only 3 people are just left the
Oh,
industry.
Osama Hussein.
Yeah,
He spoke at your conference, Rami, didn't he? Game Dev
yeah, he
World?
did.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Osama.
Okay.
Osama worked at Ubisoft for a while. He worked on like Rayman Legends and stuff like that.
Wait,
What a story.
where was he based out of when he did that?
Morocco. He was in Casablanca.
Oh my god.
Yeah,
He might be the guy.
he most probably is.
Wait, I got a story to tell you. He
Uh-huh.
might be the guy. I didn't even realize it was the same guy because I met him with Osama Hussein when he spoke at Rami's conference. Okay,
Yeah.
so when I worked at Ubisoft, I would
Mhm.
sometimes get meeting invites like at 2 and 3 a.m. like at times that don't make sense, like 5 a.m. meeting invites and emails that weren't like meant for me clearly, like they
Uh-huh.
were. And I dug in and I realized there was exactly one other Osama that worked at Ubisoft at the time, and his name was Osama Hussein, and he was out of Morocco,
Yeah,
like Casablanca specifically.
that's right.
This is the most Arab story ever. Yeah, there were 2 Osamas, and they couldn't figure out which one. So,
They just type Osama in autocompletes. They don't care. They press enter and they send the thing.
how many Osamas can there be in this
Yeah.
company, really?
But that's the shocking part. When I met him through Game Dev World, when we chatted a bit, I didn't like, and I'm like, oh, his name is also Osama Hussein. Both common names, like in the Middle East, they're not
We
that
should have him
uncommon.
on the show one time.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
crazy.
I'll reach out. No,
yeah.
he's good. He's good people.
I'm actually wondering if he ever got invites that were meant for me, or emails that are meant for me. That's a
I'm
question to
not.
ask.
I'm
Probably
not staying
happened.
up until 11 p.m. What is this nonsense?
Probably happened. The funny part is that when those guys initially asked me to join them on the game, they asked me to come in as a music composer.
Right,
Interesting.
Like I had the band and I was like playing a lot of live gigs in Jordan and stuff like that. So a lot of people actually at the time knew me for music.
music.
So they asked me like, "Why don't you join us and write the music for the game?" So I was writing the music, but also had to code it in. Like the entire game
Hmm.
was 3 megabytes. So my
Wow.
budget for music and sound effects, I had 150 to 100 kilobytes
Yep,
Wow.
for
yep.
everything. So I was writing the music for the game, but it was also like I kept on like trying to like give ideas on like how to design the game or like how to make the levels and stuff like that. And they were like, "Why don't you also be our game designer? Since you like
Right.
you're
Yeah, not. Why don't you switch to game designer?
No.
Why don't you also game
yeah,
designer?
exactly. Well, like
Yeah,
was this real indie, like nine
yep,
people who had the university and a job and making this game.
yep.
So yes, I wrote the music and I also um, became the game designer, and it's a
Amazing.
title I've held since.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
incredible.
It's funny because one of my favorite people to work with in the industry is Yukio Kallio, who did the music for Luftrausers and for Nuclear Throne.
Mm.
And I actually got to know him as an independent developer
Hmm.
like years ago, but the music was always the very best thing about the games he was making.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
So at some point, other indies started hiring him just to do music.
wow.
They're like, "Oh, your games are fine, but your music is like really, really, really good. So can we hire you?" And he's recently done like Fall Guys.
Oh
Okay.
wow, that's cool.
Yeah,
So
those
he's
are
also had
catchy
this
tunes.
incredible career. Yeah, he didn't do Fall Guys alone. He did it with another guy, but um, yeah, Yukio is phenomenal. I like how sometimes people go into the industry thinking that they'll be one thing,
Yeah.
Hmm.
and then just over time it turns out that that's not really what they do
Yep.
Yeah.
or what they love, and then it just kind of switches.
So
But
I actually worked with this guy, Ubisoft. His nickname was Fluffy. Really nice guy. He almost quit games because he went to level design school and he consistently was either failing or nearly failing every class.
hmm
And he was it was not clicking. He really wanted to be a level designer. He really wanted to be in the gaming industry, and he just wasn't doing well. Finally, he graduated by the skin of his teeth, and one of his teachers hired him. And like he was like, wait, what? He basically gave him a job interview. He's like, wait, what? I'm struggling. He's like, yeah, you're struggling at that, like the level design craft part. But you're with one of the most technical level designers I've ever seen. You're creating like structure for and like little smart objects for other people to use on your team. He became one of the best technical level designers at Ubisoft. Like, and he didn't even know that was even
hmm
an option or a
It's nice
career
that the
path.
teacher didn't say that until you could scoop him up.
I
Right,
think the teacher was trying to encourage him throughout, but he took it as teachers being teachers.
Wow.
right,
Like,
right,
yeah, fine, I'm pretty good at this spot, but look at I'm failing. Like,
right.
I'm not doing well, that kind of thing.
We,
Well, it started out like I tried my hand at everything, like and
mhm.
especially when you're like indie, you just have to do everything really. So like,
Yep.
that was just music. I was doing a bit of scripting and programming, and the other company afterwards, like we were making like a PC and a 360 game. I was
Yep.
doing VFX and particle effects at some point.
Yep,
Oh, cool.
I was doing level design. I was collecting all like I was the person that combined everything in the build. So like I'll
right.
get the assets, I'll get the code and put things together. I was doing like camera scripts, all sorts of stuff.
Yep.
Wow. I started with animation, believe it or not.
Yeah,
Um,
I started from art as well. Surprisingly, I
Oh
did
wow.
programming, but then I because I did programming and I got pretty good at it, I went to art. But what did you do in animation, Osama?
Well, actually, I started in 3D modeling briefly. I made like
Hmm.
I was part of this BBS art group. I don't know if you were old enough to remember what BBSs were.
IRC is the first thing I remember.
Yeah. So we had an art group where we literally would zip up art pieces and send them through BBSs, and they would travel across like North America. And I picked up 3D Studio Max, like one of the earlier versions. I think it was before Max. I think it was just called 3D Studio. And I made like a car in 3D in that, and then I started animating a bit. And I thought that my passion was animation because I loved animations. I loved like Disney movies. I loved like Warner Brother animations from the past. And I did the regular thing about a book back then. There was this is pre YouTube, of course, so I couldn't learn it off YouTube. You buy a book, and sometimes you're lucky that the book came with a CD-ROM. And I learned. I made a bouncing ball, and I made a human walk cycle, and I realized that I was actually more interested in the movement, like the control part of the
Uh-huh.
movement, than actually just making it move on screen. And that's when I shifted to game design. Or
Did you get to the to making the chess set, Osama, or you skipped that?
Yes. No, I made a chess set in the
And
3D
Max, right?
modeling. Yes, exactly. I tried to make a knight, gave up and made a rook because knight was too complicated. The rook was much easier. It had more symmetry. But yeah,
I
like
think the knight was always the fork in the road, and when somebody decided if they want to be a 3D modeler or not, was the knight.
yes.
Yeah. Up until the night, everything's like, okay, I could do this. Yeah, okay, it's a bit more complicated. We can still manage it. Oh, this? No, no, not for
Yep.
me.
Yep. That was a
Bouncing
lifetime
ball, it
ago.
is.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And then you tried to bounce the ball, like, yeah, like for me, that was like also not for me. I loved it. Like I learned the 12, what do you call it? The 12 rules of animation,
Yeah,
and now I understand it. When I see animators do like, when I work with animators, they don't need to explain to me twice. You know, I
yeah.
get where they're coming from,
I mean,
but I would never be able to reproduce what they do at
I
all.
think that's really the mark of a designer, though, right? It's like you have to kind of understand all the elements that go into what you have as a tool set
Yeah,
Yeah.
and what you need as a tool set. And the more you know about every discipline in games, the better you'll do in that regard.
yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
I came from art, so I came from programming originally. Did a lot of programming, practiced some writing, went to art because I never had art for my games.
Hmm.
So I just decided I wanted to learn to do art, and then I fell down an art hole for like 5 years or something. Did
Mhm.
2D art, 3D art.
Hmm.
Um, Learned a lot of particles, shader, like very early shader stuff, or at least it felt early to me. Um, and then eventually, when I was ready to register for my for Games University, I had to choose between art or programming, and I actually enrolled for both. And the first time I got
Mhm.
accepted for art, but then some paperwork went wrong, and I couldn't go to any school because
Wow.
of the paperwork issue. It was a government issue. So I skipped a year and sold computers for a year at a retail store, and then I applied again. And that time I only applied for programming or design. And then I got enrolled into both, and I picked design, and that's how I ended up on the path to Vlambeer because that was the school with the guy that I started Vlambeer with. So
Mhm.
lots of weird stuff. But
That's
yeah, no,
cool.
I don't know. It's weird how when you look back, it all makes sense, and then you try to see how that might extrapolate into the future. You're like, yeah, no idea.
I like it that whenever you speak to anybody in the industry, I ask them, "How did you end up in the gaming
Yeah.
industry?" Because like
Right.
everybody wants to join, but then like it almost never happens in the straightforward way that they
No.
expect it to be. Everybody has a story about how they're like, "Well, I wanted to do this thing, and then somehow I ended up doing this other thing that led me to do this thing that I'm doing right
Yes.
now."
Well, that's
Everybody,
from our time because like now, as I teach in university, and I know some of you teach as well.
yeah.
Now a lot of people are like, well, I wanted to make games since I was a kid, and that was always available to me as an option. And I went
Right.
to school and I learned how
When
to do it, and I graduated.
when when I
Yeah,
was
that's
really
true.
young, my first game was Halo Reach. I'm like, yep, nope, I'm out. I'm out of this conversation. That's not. I don't want to accept that somebody who played Halo Reach as their first game is now old enough to be learning game design.
Yeah. And now we're gonna get a whole bunch of my first game was Roblox or Fortnite.
I can live with that because it feels like it, but like Halo Reach is one of those games that I like just strongly remember as like a 20s, like when I was in my 20s
Yeah.
game. Getting old is mostly just a lot of existential crises, isn't it?
I mentioned Bioshock in a class full of game design hopefuls, and only a handful knew what I was talking about. That's
I'm
that's different. Right.
It hits different.
Yeah, it does. It hits you in the gut, and you're like, 2 or 3 knew about it. One had played it. That's it.
Well, who plays retro games?
We do apparently. So it's funny that you said that you learned art because you needed art for your games. Actually, when I made Flash games, I also picked up pixel art. I'm actually going to
Right.
share a link from the Wayback Machine because my blog doesn't exist anymore. But those are Street Fighter characters I made in one of my favorite pixel artist style. It's not excellent. It's not great, but I
It's
dabbled with
pretty
it.
good to some.
We'll
Thank you.
put this. We'll put this in the show
I'll
notes.
put it in the show notes.
Yeah, that was my old blog.
What was it about? About Street Fighter?
No, it was mostly about just me and what I did, but that made it mostly about video games and comic books.
You had a 2010 WordPress.
Yeah, I did.
Wild.
Yeah, I think my WordPress actually predates 2010. It was older than that. Like I think I
believe
upgraded
it.
a couple of times. Yeah, I told
Incredible.
you I was into this kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's just I had like a what was it I had like a free domain at a .tk like.
Oh yeah, I've had GeoCities. I've had like name it. I've had yeah, like I've tried everything. What was it? Blogspot was one of them.
Oh yeah, I had a blogspot as well.
Yeah. I've
I,
had
when
all
I
of
when I
those.
started getting more visible, I just wiped all of it.
Yeah, I should too because like a lot of the articles there I would be embarrassed for people to read.
Right.
It was a different time. I was younger and a lot less mature, so I'm sure the same for you as well. Um, so yeah, I think that's normal.
I'm
Right.
very happy that a lot of these services don't exist. Just in case, like, I forgot to remove any of these old websites. They
Yeah.
just they took care of themselves.
Yeah,
It's a really weird thing about today, isn't it? That everything gets saved forever.
yeah.
Yeah,
I think the kids are smart. You know that all the kids switch to like Snapchat and like stories and stuff like that, where it's like it's there for a day and then it's gone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Kids are smarter. We were tricked into this version of the reality where everything I said back in 2010 is still on the internet in like an index searchable state.
Yeah.
I think there was like one time an interview with Will Smith, and I think he was like talking about how I think his son posted some like dumb stuff on the internet,
Right.
and he was saying like when I was a kid I was dumb too, but I was dumb in private.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Yes.
And I feel like we kind of like our childhood we were luckily had that option, but like some of the people right now, good luck.
Yeah. Like
I-
we've videotaped ourselves doing stupid things at some point, but then only we saw it. That's
Yeah.
the big difference.
Also,
right?
it's on VHS. Good luck finding one now. to run this.
Exactly. Or a VCR. Exactly.
Well, I mean, my generation, because I guess I'm a little younger than you guys. Mine was more of like, okay, everything goes on Blogspot. Everybody has a blog, right? And on Twitter, Facebook, stuff like that. So there was like a local community site for my city
Yeah.
with a forum. And I had to go back and go in and just delete the entire account there as well, because it's like, well, I don't really need people to know that much about me. I never considered that people would care about any part of my life.
Yeah.
Or we want to know.
Here's the thing, Rami. Like there's this feature on Facebook that every now and then tells you 10 years ago you said this,
Right.
and I look at it and go like, oh boy, I actually said that.
Yeah.
Why was I saying something this ridiculous?
Yep.
I had too strong opinions about video games in the past, or comics or whatever. I used to get angry, like whenever things didn't go my way, whenever a character was announced that I didn't want, or things like that. That's the stuff I'm really embarrassed about. But well, it didn't get much worse than that, thankfully.
Right. Yeah.
The other like the thing that I saw from the other day is that even 10 years ago I still defended Skyward Sword. So like
Everybody has embarrassing opinions.
everybody have embarrassing opinions. That's still stuff. Which reminds me, if we were playing that the cheating game that Osama did earlier with his Chrono Trigger answer, I could have easily have said Ocarina of Time on the 3DS.
Oh, I'm so relieved. I thought you were going to say Skyward Sword again.
There's no Skyward Sword on the 3DS. If you add the
Listen.
Switch to this,
Listen, Posey, if you told me that you had ported Skyward Sword to the 3DS through some hacker emulation stuff, I'd be like, that sounds like Fauzi.
Hell yeah, I believe you. And it runs in Arabic too.
Oh, man, that wasn't a smart idea at all. Like that
No.
bitmap was taking so much of the size. Also, that game was way too big for our ambitions and our
Yeah.
experience.
I mean,
So you learned about
when
scoping early. Good.
Oh, super
I-
early! Like we completely overestimated our abilities and underestimated the scope of the project.
Yup.
did I ever tell you the story of how Flambeer like started from a really bad project?
No.
Oh, tell me.
So I was in uni, right? And first year was awesome. First year of game design university was awesome because I had learned how to program, I'd learned how to design, I could write, I could do art, but I wasn't particularly good at anything but programming,
Mhm.
right? And the school kind of forced me to like face that,
Mhm.
right? I got art class, I got design class, I got interaction design, which is not in games, but sort of interaction in general. I got taught a lot of models and like interesting ways of thinking about things. So it was really useful. And then in the second year, they kind of didn't know where to go from there. So they kind of just did the same thing again. But by then it was boring because every time you teach me a subject, I read all about it. I find the books, I research it, I want to know all about it. And then when I've learned all of it, I get bored by it. Right. So my second year was the same thing. And I got bored. So I started a project and I said, you know what? We're going to make an Xbox Live Arcade game.
Mhm.
So I got a team together. First of the people I trusted most, and then of the people that I thought I would need to make a 3D Xbox Live Arcade game. And I ended up with a team of 24 people.
Wow.
And it was
That's
24.
a big team.
Yeah.
It was 24 of the best people at that school, not just in my year, but also in the year under me, the year above me, and the year above that. And let me say with confidence that that project would have never succeeded. But that said, we did get in on Xbox Live Arcade. We got the game greenlit, we got like everything ready, and we were just developing the game. And that, getting a game greenlit on Xbox Live Arcade back in those days was kind of a big deal for a student.
Yeah.
It is. Big deal.
So we were just kind of plugging away at that, and we were never going to make it. We were absolutely never going to make it. But the thing that happened was school shut it down because they needed those students, especially in the third and fourth year, to work on projects that school was getting from external people,
Mhm.
from external companies. And that's how school kind of placed their students in companies, was by having their students work on external companies, making those companies think like, oh, okay, these students are good and they're already in the company, so we'll give them a job. Right? So that's kind of how school worked, how the university worked. So third and fourth years, we're doing internships or working for external partners. And I took all the best students and put them on my project. So school was like, yeah, no, the project is over. And I'm like, what? And they're like, yep, you signed your rights away when you joined the university. So we're just going to shut it down now. It's too risky.
Mm.
Wow.
And that's when I went, well, you know what? I don't need this. So I had promised my team that I was going to do whatever I could to get the game out there. And I couldn't do that within school. So I quit. And then there was one other guy on that team who quit as well. And that was JW. That was my co-founder.
Oh, okay.
Ah, crazy.
I had learned to respect him about 6 months earlier when he had shown me a game called If You Really Want It, You Can Fly. It was one of those trick games, and it was just really well done. Like, he really read what everybody's response was going to be and in what order and how you could escalate the joke. And it was just incredibly well done, even though it wasn't really a game and more of a gag. But that was the first time I looked at this annoying, obnoxious little art hipster and went like, oh, okay. Kid knows what he's talking about. And he thought of me as like an obnoxious, annoying suit that only cared about money because I was doing commercial games. So the only reason we ended up working together is because we both hated school more than we hated each other. That's how it worked out.
A match made in heaven.
Well, I wouldn't say that,
Well,
but
you
it was a
complemented
very
each other,
unique.
though.
Yeah, it was a very unique collaboration. I think the thing I like a lot is if I look at JW now, you can see how much he has learned from the things I did, and if you look at me now, you can see how much I've learned from the things JW did. I think we both became much better people for having worked together. Obviously, I can't speak for JW, so maybe he just thinks he became far worse as a person for being around me. But I definitely think that it was interesting to work this closely with somebody that is that different in almost every way than I am. Like, well, our partners, for me, an ex-partner, once decided to take us on a double date to the cinema, and then did that thing where they forced us to sit next to each other to see if we could be friends, and we ended up fighting our way out of the cinema effectively, like big argument about whether the movie was bad. And I think that's the last time they ever tried to do that. Just we were so different as people, but it was really cool to work together. I'm very ready to not do that again, though. Like, I've tried that. I think there's absolute value in working with people that are completely different from you. I kind of want to work for the future. I want to work with people where I'm more aligned. Because I think there is tremendous potential in collision, like creative collision. But I've never tried what happens if you do creative alignment. I just kind of want to try.
Well,
Yeah,
like it's
Go ahead.
it's science at this point.
Yeah.
Diverse teams are just different.
Hmm.
That come from different backgrounds, that are different from each other, perform better.
Yep.
It's science.
Yeah.
They just do better.
But there's
Statistically
also
across the board, every time performance was measured, the more diverse the team was, the more they were, different. They come from different backgrounds. They were creatively different. All of that stuff. They just perform better.
right. I just have a firm belief that there must be something between polar opposites and diverse. Right.
Mhm.
There must be somewhere in between. 'Cause
I don't know
I
if you
think
guys were complete polar opposites as well. You
we
definitely,
literally had two things in common. We believed in the games we were making, and we liked bad sci-fi.
that's pretty. That's pretty. That's
That
a
was
lot.
it.
That's a lot.
On a scale of 10 years of effectively marriage, that's not a lot.
People get married with less things in common.
So I think what's important is like, yeah, diversity in your teams, absolutely. But I think what's important is shared values. I think
Right.
if you have different values as people, the struggle of what to create is going to it's going to hold you back, because the arguments aren't going to be about how to do things, but it's going to be forever about should you do things, or what is it that you want to do together.
Yeah.
So I think that there is that middle path. It's not in like ethnic backgrounds or like life experiences so much as it is in people who believe the same things, like who have the same values. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
there needs to be enough of an overlap that people can communicate with each other. Is what
Exactly.
you're trying to say. And I
Exactly.
think what happened with me and JW was the opposite. We had no way to communicate with each other because we just hated each other's guts.
Mhm.
But then we were forced to sit in a room together and make things, and we realized that the things we tried to make were similar.
Hmm.
So I think that's what happened. We just learned to talk, but it took like 2 or 3 years before we learned to talk. And the only reason we could afford to do that is because we had no expenses,
Hmm.
right? Like, we were two students. So
I think you're the only indie devs I've ever heard who are open about not liking each other and yet stayed together for years and years. I think you're unique in that way.
I think it was really important because I think back then, like, Flambeer was always a statement studio. And I think back then, the thing I realized is that every indie dev I knew was homogenous as, they were just the same people. They were
Yeah.
just people that agreed with each other, that liked each other, that were hanging out with each other, doing the same thing. And I always felt that there was value in having opposite viewpoints.
Hmm.
So, um, I was always very open about that because I felt it fit the story that I wanted to tell of like different people working together. So I might have been a little aggressive in telling that story. It's not like we hated each other, but
But you
you
worked
know,
together for 10 years.
for
Hmm.
10 years,
So
but
that's two more than the Beatles.
right, right, fair. To, to be honest, it was funny because near the end we were barely talking. Like, while
Wow.
we were making Nuclear Throne, we had like a weekly, or like, obviously I got the new build and I did my part and he did his part, and I would watch the stream if he was streaming, and that was kind of it,
Hmm.
because I trusted him to do what he did best, and he trusted me to take whatever was broken and fix it.
Hmm.
And I would upload the build and deal with all the community and marketing stuff and the business side of things. So I was doing like code cleanup
Hmm.
and like testing. And then every now and then, when I saw something in the design or a direction in a thing he would drawn in the Dropbox or something, I didn't like it, I would call him and be like, "Yo, this ain't it. I don't think that's gonna work." And if he saw something that I fixed in code and he's like, "Yo, that's not what I meant," he would call me and be like, "That's not what I meant."
Hmm.
But beyond that, we weren't talking anymore. was no reason for us to talk. I trusted him, he trusted me, and we just kind of did our own thing on that project.
That's
So it's
hilarious.
actually incredible that it came out as coherent as it did, and I think a large part of that was just good responsibility setting, right? Like it
Hmm.
was clear what he did and what I did. But yeah, I think the biggest collaboration we ever had was probably on Luftrausers.
Hmm.
Ridiculous Fishing, me and JW didn't work much together either because JW was working with Zach and I was mostly working with like integration. Um, and then on Super Crate Box, we worked together very closely. On Serious Sam, we worked together very closely, and then on Luftrausers, we worked together very closely, and that was about it.
Wow, man, it's amazing for me to hear that. Like
Yeah.
it's great that those games really turned out great, but like
Hmm.
you wouldn't have known that they had like such an interesting character dynamic going on in the background.
Right. It was
Yeah.
always very odd. Like it was always we would only talk to each other if we really disagreed about something.
Mm.
Yeah.
Now, for me, like my indie years were like amongst the best years of my life. We all got along super well, right? Like we were
That sounds
spending
nice.
over 12 hours a day together every day, for like 7 days a week, because we were like, if we're not making the games, we're playing games together. We're playing so much StarCraft. We're playing so much Street Fighter. And later
We
on, we're playing so much Dota and Call of Duty and Battlefield. It was, it was nuts. Like I was hanging out with these guys the entire time. We're super close.
Hmm.
Yeah, so that was not that. We one of the best expenses Vlambeer ever had was a 6 meter or 10 meter, I think, 3.5 millimeter audio cable. Because we had a Logitech speaker set that we bought for like $30 somewhere, and it had an audio cable, and the way we set it up is JW controlled what music played, and then the audio cable went to me where there was a volume wheel, and then that went to the speakers. So JW could choose the music, and I could set the volume,
That's
and that was it. That was it because I never agreed to what JW was listening to. Like it was always some French screaming music, and I was like, you know what? I appreciate that you appreciate this, but I need to program, so I can't. And then the funny thing is, the funny thing about JW that he was always good at is like the music would like 30% of the music he listened to would be the next big thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then 5 years, like 5 months later, I'd be listening to the music unironically. I'd be like, well, you can put that back in the playlist. And then I liked it, so it wasn't cool for him anymore. So he would try and find something new.
He's like,
Our
oh
entire
god.
dynamic was this nonsense. It was all this nonsense all the time.
Huh. My indie experience, because I worked at a small indie studio for a year at one point. The team got along really really well. Like really, we loved each other. We were friends outside of work as well. We were about 12 to 20 people depending on at what point. We didn't get along with a certain member of management, but that actually brought us closer together. It was like,
Common enemy.
yeah, exactly. So that was mostly the experience on big projects, and I'm sure you could corroborate that, Fauzi. It's impossible for everyone to get along. There's too many people. Like, how are you
Yeah,
going
of
to
course.
find hundreds of like-minded people? So you're always going to have the people that you get along with more and the people that you get along with less. I've been blessed. Generally, I've loved the people I've worked with closely over the years, but there's always going to be the exceptions. That's normal. That's why your situation is so interesting, Remy, because you're exactly two people. You can choose to work with anyone you want, and you stuck around for 10 years. Like it's different when it's 20 people and there's a couple that you
Right.
don't like, or
It just
300 people and there's 100 you don't like. Those are different dynamics, right?
I think the thing is that around that core group of two, we collected so many great people that
Yeah.
like both of us, which I still believe is not possible, but
Yeah.
okay. But we had Paul Veer who did our art, and we had Yukio, and we had Eirik Surka, and we had Jonas Turner, and we had Fred Wood, and we had like this team of people that would hop on board for projects, and working with them was a delight,
Yeah.
Mhm.
just an absolute delight. And then I would have to talk to JW, and it would be like, okay, so this needs to happen.
But you get
Okay.
along now, though, right?
No, we don't.
Still, wow.
No, like the point is we don't get along. It's not that we didn't get along creatively. That's the only time we got along
Okay.
was creatively. I think we get along less now than we did before
Wow.
because we don't have anything in common anymore. Like the only thing we have in common is that Vlambeer is in our past, and that we are proud of what we did those years. But we have nothing left to talk about. I catch up every now and then and ask how things are with the people dear to him, and he asks me how things are with people dear to me, and then we just kind of go like, okay, cool,
That's enough. That's good.
bye,
Okay.
bye. It's nice. It's honestly nice. Like, it's funny to have a person that you don't really have anything to talk to have them have been such a big part of your life. Because I hope the best for him, right? Like, I hope that all the things he does go really well, and his new Kickstarter, Dustbiters, just completed with like 400% or something.
Wow.
And I saw that card game when it was like scribblings on paper. And now seeing like the fully polished, beautiful version of it is incredible. And he's obviously done Disc Room since Vlambeer broke up, and he done Minute since Vlambeer broke up. So he's still doing incredible work, and it's a delight to see the games that he's working on. It's a delight to see how they're different from Vlambeer games, because it reminds me of what my part of that studio was. But they're still very good. Like, he's an incredibly good designer. So it's fun to now be able to watch those games and play that kind of work without having to deal with him.
Yep.
You should have him on the podcast at some point.
Absolutely not.
I've never met him. I'm looking forward to meeting him someday.
He's wonderful if you're not me. It's really weird because a lot of people are friends with both of us, and they say, "Yeah, I like both of you," and I'm like, I don't understand how that works. I genuinely don't get it. How is that possible? But
It's okay.
apparently it's possible.
Yeah, it could also be because you've met at a certain time in your life, by the way. That's a possibility as well. Like, if you've met
Nah.
him...
The
Okay.
two of us are really, really, really different.
I think I'm going to stop trying. Fauzi, maybe we should just stop trying. All right.
when you meet him, imagine me sitting in a room with him for 10 years and then tell me whether that was going to work out or not.
Fair. That's fair. All right. I think we've run the whole gauntlet. Maybe this is... maybe not.
You know that we never even made it out of our game segment?
Yeah, I watched Shang-Chi and I didn't even get to talk about it.
What if, all that.
Okay, so you know what? We'll save those topics for next week. One of you has to watch Shang-Chi, so I have someone to spar with.
Okay. I'll see if I can make it happen.
Exactly, and catch up on what if. I mean, there's virtually no.
I wanted to talk about Destiny.
It's good. Well, it's a good thing this is a weekly podcast. We'll have another chance, right?
Fair.
All right. So yeah, that's it. Thank you very much for listening. We really love you, and send us emails because that's how I always.
Oh no, he's going off script.
It's tradition at this point.
Please send us emails so someone will ask. Stop asking about emails.
We should really write him a script to close that.
Right. He keeps it a script. On the intro, he said 3 Arabic game developers.
I know it is.
Arabic tea. Like, what is Arabic tea?
I don't know.
That tea that speaks Arabic?
I don't know. I'm not good at improv, but it's fun. I make up for it.
That's why we have a script.
Hey, at least I'm consistent, right?
I wouldn't call it consistent. It's there.
He's consistently surprising. That's what's happening.
As long as you love me, that's all that matters.
We do.
All right. Salam.
That was the Habibis podcast for this week. I'm Osama Dorias, your host for this episode. You can find me on Twitter at Osama Dorias. My fellow Habibis were Rami Ismail, you can find on Twitter at @THA_Rami, and Fauzi Mesmar, who you can find on Twitter at Fauzi Mesmar. Send us your questions, stories, suggestions via info@thehabibis.com. Intro and outro music was provided by Malik Zubayla, and the logo was provided by Ibrahim Hamdi. The Habibis is a weekly podcast about 3 game developers drinking good Arab tea, with new episodes launching every Friday, inshallah. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcasting service, or check out thehabibis.com for more information. Thank you for listening, and Assalamu alaikum.